9. Kira Enders and Dakota Jones. In March of 2024, 36-year-old Kira Enders and 32-year-old Dakota Jones were accused of trying to trick Florida state lottery officials into awarding them a $1 million prize. According to investigators, the couple submitted a ticket consisting of mismatching halves from different tickets, which were crudely taped together and laminated to conceal the alterations. The suspects were apparently unaware that the two halves had different serial numbers on them, making it extremely easy for a lottery representative to identify it as fraudulent. During a meeting with the agent, Enders and Jones were questioned separately. Enders claimed that the ticket ripped because she tried to scratch it off after it fell out of her car and got rained on. She said that she mailed the ticket to the Florida Lottery after it failed to scan at 3 different stores, and she acted surprised when confronted about the mismatching serial numbers. Jones told a different story, claiming that he and Enders found the ticket halves lying a few dozen yards apart on the ground while walking together along a roadside. According to a police report, he seemed to briefly acknowledge that Enders knew the halves didn't go together before quickly backtracking and claiming that they thought the ticket was legitimate. Enders and Jones are facing charges of presenting a forged state lottery ticket, forging a lottery ticket with the intent to defraud, and grand theft of $100,000 or more. If convicted as charged, they could each face up to 30 years of the grand larceny charge and a 5-year maximum sentence on each forgery count. 8. Ashley Singh and Sophie Breya. In a year-long crime spree that began in 2022, 39-year-old Ashley Singh and 20-year-old Sophie Breya robbed gym lockers across London and southeast England. They stole from at least 18 people, then maxed out the victims' credit cards and drained their bank accounts on luxury travel and goods, including handbags and even a purebred puppy. Singh and Breya showed off their lifestyle on social media as they stayed at upscale hotels and splurged on experiences that are normally reserved for the wealthy. While the couple were living it up without a care in the world, their victims fell into financial ruin and had their lives destroyed. Police finally caught up with the pair as they arrived at Gatwick Airport from Paris with a few $1,000s worth of goods. Singh and Breya were both found guilty of conspiracy to commit fraud by false representation. The court sentenced Singh to 3 years in prison, while Breya received a 20-month sentence at a facility for young offenders. 7. Kenneth Noi. 21-year-old Stephen Cameron and his girlfriend Danielle Cable were driving in Swanley, England in 1996 when they got into a confrontation with another driver. The other driver was later identified as 48-year-old career criminal Kenneth Noi. During the scuffle that ensued, Noi pulled a knife and stabbed Cameron in a fit of road rage. He then got back into his Land Rover and calmly drove away, leaving Cameron to die from his injuries. Noi was on his way to a family dinner at the time of the encounter. When he showed up drunk, disheveled, and with visible injuries, his relatives asked him what had happened. He explained that he had stabbed someone in self-defense and didn't seem worried about getting caught because his vehicle was registered under an alias. Even after learning that Cameron had died, Noi continued with his day like usual. He went out drinking with a friend, but by the next day, he decided it was in his best interests to flee. Noi reached out to his friend John Goldfinger Palmer, who had helped him carry out the prolific Brinks Mat bank heist during the 80s that Noi had taken the fall for. With Palmer's help and a fake passport, Noi snuck into France and then Spain. By the time police identified him as the suspect, he was long gone from England. He used his connections with high-ranking and corrupt members of law enforcement to stay informed on whether the authorities were on his trail. In 1998, 2 years after the deadly road rage incident, investigators tracked Noi to southern Spain. By then, he probably thought he had gotten away with his actions and had most likely let his guard down. During his trial for Cameron's murder, Noi claimed he acted in self-defense and that he only fled because he didn't think the justice system would treat him fairly due to his criminal history. Danielle Cable testified against him and has been in witness protection ever since. The jury found Noi guilty, and he served 20 years in prison before being paroled in 2019. 6. Trang Vu. In what initially appeared to be a robbery gone wrong, 49-year-old Tuyet Ngop Tran was found bludgeoned to death inside her Houston beauty salon in July of 2015. Investigators began to think differently when they found Chan's credit cards and cash at the crime scene. This led them to believe that the scene had been staged to look like a botched robbery. But without any solid leads to go on, the case came to a standstill. Chan's husband, Trang Vu, changed his name to Itani Mileni 3 months after the murder. He signed away his rights to the couple's children, began working as a truck driver, and moved out of the area. 4 years after the homicide, Vu tried to collect on Chan's life insurance policy instead of letting their kids have the money, prompting police to reopen the investigation into the case. Authorities charged Vu with Chan's murder, and in late 2022, the case finally went to trial. The jury found Vu guilty, and he was sentenced to 55 years in prison. 5. Philip Monroe Ballard. After being arrested on federal tax crimes in Fort Worth, Texas in 2011, 71-year-old self-proclaimed sovereign citizen Philip Monroe Ballard was held in custody pending the outcome of his case. During his time as a pretrial detainee, he asked a fellow inmate to help him set up a murder for hire. Fearful that he would receive a long prison sentence for his financial crimes, Ballard wanted to pay someone $100,000 to kill U.S. District Judge John McBride, who was overseeing his case. The inmate told the FBI about the request and introduced Ballard to an undercover agent posing as a hitman. Ballard provided the undercover with detailed instructions for where, when, and how he wanted the job done. He also gave orders for a plan B, telling the undercover to plant a bomb in the judge's car if the shooting was unsuccessful. After Ballard's sister dropped off a $5,000 down payment to an address provided by the undercover, federal authorities charged him with attempted murder for hire. In court, Ballard's lawyer claimed that his client had no serious intention of harming the judge, but the jury was unswayed. Ballard was convicted as charged and sentenced to the maximum term of 20 years in prison. Now 83 years old, he remains behind bars at a medical prison in Massachusetts with a projected release date in July of 2029. 4. Igor and Irena Vorotinov. In October of 2011, the decomposing body of a man was found along a dirt road in a remote town in central Moldova. Along with the remains, police found a passport and ID documents belonging to a man in his 40s named Igor Vorotinov. Authorities called Igor's ex-wife, Irena Vorotinov, who flew to Moldova from the U.S. to identify the body. She confirmed that the remains belonged to Igor and had him cremated before flying back to the family's community in Minnesota, where a funeral was held. Less than a year later, in June of 2012, Irena and Igor's adult son, Alkin, took a trip to Moldova, where he found his father alive and well. Igor was living under an alias in Eastern Europe and supporting himself with the proceeds of a $2 million life insurance payout that Irena had collected despite knowing he was not dead. According to investigators, the scam involved help from crooked Moldovan government officials, who vouched for Igor's death when they were interviewed by the insurance company. Authorities first caught on to the fraud when they noticed that Alkin was making a suspicious number of trips to Moldova. They detained Irena and Alkin as they returned to the U.S. from one of their many visits and discovered recent photos of the supposedly dead Igor. In a last-ditch effort to protect his family, Igor spoke with law enforcement over the phone, claiming that his friends had faked his death without his knowledge and kidnapped him in a bid to steal the insurance funds. But the tall tale failed to fool prosecutors, who described the story as palpably ridiculous. Igor was arrested in Moldova and extradited to the US, where he, Irena, and Alkin all faced various federal charges. In 2016, Irena pleaded guilty to mail fraud and engaging in a monetary transaction in criminally derived property. She was sentenced to just over 3 years in prison. Alkin also took a plea deal and was sentenced to 3 years of probation. Igor pleaded guilty to mail fraud and received a 41-month prison sentence. 3. Laum Van Nguyen. In March of 2012, a man in his early 40s named Laum Van Nguyen began searching for a hitman who was willing to kill several people in Vietnam. Acting on a tip from a confidential informant, federal authorities introduced Nguyen to an undercover immigrant and customs agent who pretended they could arrange the murders overseas. During a meeting at Starbucks near his home in Tukwila, Washington, Nguyen explained that his nephew in Vietnam could help the hitmen locate the target. But he was angry at his nephew for allegedly stealing money from him, so he told the agent to go ahead and kill him too, once they got the information they needed from him. Altogether, Nguyen wanted several people killed and was willing to pay tens of thousands of dollars for it, as long as the hits were carried out successfully. He made a down payment, but made it clear that he would only fulfill the balance if the intended victims died. After handing over the money, Nguyen was swiftly taken into custody. In court, he argued that he was just joking about wanting people killed and chalked the situation up to a cultural misunderstanding, claiming that it was normal for people to casually joke about murder in Vietnam. But a Vietnamese-American federal agent who worked the case was happy to clarify for the court that this was untrue, and Nguyen eventually realized it was in his best interests to take a plea deal. In late 2013, he pleaded guilty to conspiracy to kill persons in a foreign country and solicitation to commit a crime of violence. The judge imposed the recommended prison term of 14 years. 2. Julie Wheeler. In May of 2020, Rodney Wheeler dialed 911 and claimed that his 43-year-old wife, Julie Wheeler, had fallen from an overlook at West Virginia's Grandview State Park. Hundreds of volunteers, search and rescue personnel, and members of law enforcement participated in a massive air and ground search. Julie's shoe and cell phone were found at the base of the cliff that she supposedly fell from, but the search crews found no sign of the missing woman herself. It only added to investigators' already heightened suspicions over the timing of Julie's disappearance. It occurred shortly after she was convicted of healthcare fraud. She was awaiting sentencing when she vanished, leading law enforcement to suspect that she and Rodney had faked her death to avoid facing punishment in the case. Police confirmed these suspicions when they found Julie hiding in a closet at her home. According to prosecutors, Rodney and Julie planned to permanently go into hiding together after staging Julie's death. Rodney Wheeler was accused of repeatedly giving false statements to state and federal law enforcement throughout the investigation. He also made at least one Facebook post containing false claims about his wife's accident, needlessly causing the couple's friends, loved ones, and the community into grief-stricken heartbreak. Rodney pleaded guilty to obstruction of justice and was sentenced to 2 months in federal prison, followed by 6 months of house arrest and 3 years of supervised release. Julie was found guilty in the healthcare fraud case, along with 1 count of conspiracy to obstruct justice. The court sentenced her to consecutive terms of 1 to 10 years in federal prison for the fraud charge and 1 to 5 years for the conspiracy charge. 1. Stephen McKinney. In what initially appeared to be a tragic boating accident in April of 2017, 47-year-old Stephen McKinney called emergency services in the middle of the night and claimed his wife, 35-year-old Lou Na McKinney, had slipped and fallen into the water during a family vacation on Northern Ireland's Lough Erne. And because she couldn't swim and Stephen couldn't find her, the outcome wasn't looking good. Stephen claimed that he had jumped into the water to try saving Luna, but that she kept pulling him down. He continued to search for his wife, but didn't see her again until police arrived. By then, it was too late to save her. By all appearances, Stephen seemed distraught, but investigators quickly noticed discrepancies in his stories. They also knew that Stephen was lying about him and Lu Na having a happy marriage, and that Lu Na had visited a divorce lawyer a few months earlier. Based on the findings of their investigation, authorities charged Stephen with murder. During his trial, prosecutors described him as a controlling, manipulative, coercive man who mistreated his wife and couldn't accept her decision to leave him. Stephen was accused of killing Lu Na so that he could end his marriage on his own terms, and without having to cede any of his control. The case against Stephen was based almost entirely on circumstantial evidence, but it took the jury just 2 hours of deliberating to find him guilty of murder. He was sentenced to life with a minimum of 20 years and continues to maintain his innocence from behind bars, despite having lost several appeals.
10. Bank robbing couple. An idiotic couple named John Mogan and Ashley Dubow have been charged with robbing a bank in Asheville, Ohio. According to the police, Mogan was the one who did the actual robbing, but his girlfriend was still an accomplice. He may have gotten away with the crime if he hadn't gone on social media 4 days later and posted pictures of himself and Ashley posing with the loot they ripped off from the bank. In one of the ludicrous photographs, Mogan can even be seen stuffing a huge wad of cash into his mouth. Clearly, he has no idea just how dirty cash money really is. If he didn't get pink eye from that, I'd be really surprised. Naturally, the couple got busted by the police. It really doesn't pay to upload evidence for the cops online where they can easily get it. Both Mogan and Dubow were charged with theft and robbery, currently behind bars at the infamous Pickaway County Jail. Their bond was set at $250,000, but it was more of a formality than anything. These dumb crooks clearly don't have that much money lying around. They don't even have enough brain cells to stay off social media for 5 minutes after committing a bank robbery. 9. Falling asleep on the job. A thief in Thailand was woken up by the police after taking a nap in a pretty stupid place. In fact, this thief may be the stupidest one we've seen so far today. The criminal broke into somebody's house to rob them, but he was suddenly stricken by the need to take a nap. He fell asleep in a child's room and was woken up when the owner of the house called the police. The owner just so happened to be a police officer, asleep in the other room while the robber was napping in his daughter's room. Clearly, the thief didn't stake out the house very well before attempting to rob it. The police officer, when he woke up and realized the man was sleeping in his daughter's bed, phoned his police buddies and they showed up to arrest him. The video of his arrest has since gone viral, and the hilarious look on this guy's face when he realizes what's happening is priceless. If you're going to rob a house, maybe stay away from houses where police live, and maybe don't fall asleep in the middle of the job. 8. Instant karma. In Canada, the act of stealing packages off people's porches has become increasingly problematic. It's one of the easiest yet most despicable robbery-type crimes that a person can commit. But in Mississauga, a suburb of Toronto, one of these sneaky porch bandits got some instant karma. He was driving through the suburb, scouting out packages to steal from people's houses. He saw one that looked enticing, so he pulled his car up, ran to the door, and stole the package. But this was in the winter, and he was driving a Toyota Yaris. He ended up getting stuck in the driveway because his car couldn't back out of the snow. This is the Canadian equivalent of robbing a bank with an empty tank of gas. The homeowner actually walked outside and saw the man with his package, which scared the thief, causing him to drop the package and run back to his car. In his haste to leave, he backed right into a snowbank. He was now stuck between the driveway and the snow with his wheels spinning fruitlessly. The homeowner, instead of getting angry, simply pulled out his phone, called the police, and then filmed the thief desperately trying to get away. But he never did. and the cops showed up quickly and took the porch pirate into custody. 7. An illegible note. Craig Gurnett was released from prison in August after serving over 10 years in prison for robbing banks. This was back in 2006 when police finally caught up to him after a string of robberies that included 4 banks and 11 shops. Just hours after he got out of jail, he went back to robbing. He's now facing new charges and yet another string of heists. But for whatever reason, maybe he spent too much time in jail, he no longer had the skills he needed. His first robbery was at the TD Bank in Washington Heights. He demanded cash and made a getaway with a whopping $759. Next week, he pulled off another heist on another TD Bank, this time getting away with an outstanding $568. He hit a Chase Bank that same day, earned himself $1,000, and then later in the afternoon tried to rob a third bank in Harlem. This time, though, he made a pretty silly error. When he wrote the note that he was supposed to give to the person behind the cash register, he wrote it so poorly that the woman couldn't read it. The bank teller looked at the note, looked back at Gurnett, and told him that she couldn't read the note. In response, he asked if she was stupid and then informed her that he was robbing the bank. He got away with absolutely no money this time, and the cops caught up to him just a little while later. We don't know how many years behind bars Gurnett will get this time, but considering his history, they'll probably never let him out again. 6. The Wheelchair Bandit. In Pittsburgh, a man in a wheelchair did not let his disability stop him from trying to rob a bank. It's hard to say whether this guy was dumb, delusional, or simply courageous. He rolled himself into the First National Bank on the south side of town dressed in a hooded sweatshirt with glasses on and a black hat. He handed a note to the teller informing her that he had a bomb in his backpack and that he would kill everyone inside the bank unless she handed over $50,000. Naturally, the bank teller activated the alarm, but then something very unusual happened. When the teller broke down and started crying, the robber seemed disheartened and upset. He wheeled himself out of the bank without ever receiving the money. Obviously, he felt extremely guilty. When the FBI and police officers showed up on the scene, they quickly found the man's wheelchair abandoned near the bank. When they checked surveillance footage, they saw him getting out of the chair, getting on a public bus, and driving away. Apparently, he hadn't really needed the wheelchair that badly. So how did he get caught after making his daylight getaway? A police officer watching the news that night recognized the man from the security footage. He had helped him cross the street the day before. The man was identified as 56-year-old Emmanuel Luna, and he has since been sentenced to spend 46 months in federal prison for the attempted robbery. Do you think this was a fair sentence for the wheelchair bank robber? Or do you think the fact that he felt so guilty that he left without the money should get him off easier? Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to hit thumbs up and subscribe. 5. The wrong train. Don't think for a second that stupid criminals are a modern invention. Back in Minnesota in 1897, a group of exceptionally brain-dead train robbers messed up their heist so bad people are still talking about it today. The robbery happened near Glendon on September 26th. The train was heading west when the robbers appeared. One of them crawled over what used to be called the coal tender car, the car that holds all the coal to keep the locomotive running. According to local county archivist Mark Pyle, this individual pulled a gun on the locomotive engineer and told him to stop the train. This was the first stage of the robbery. The second stage involved another man, the accomplice. His job was to unhook the cars behind the locomotive, the cars that were full of troublesome passengers. You see, behind the actual locomotive, meaning the front part of the train that drags the rest of the cars along, there are a number of different cars. Some cars carry valuables, some are for dining, and some are for passengers. The accomplice was supposed to unlock the cars carrying the passengers so that they could keep the cars full of valuables. The plan didn't go quite as expected. The accomplice unhooked the wrong cars. Instead of just letting the passengers go, he let all the cars, including the one with all the valuables, go as well. By the time they realized their mistake, the first man had already ordered the locomotive engineer to keep going. The prize that the robbers wanted was now miles behind them. So all they managed to do was steal some pocket watches, spare change, and a bit of pocket lint. Then they took off running and were never seen again. 4. The Body Wash Bandit. The Body Wash Bandit has no real name because he hasn't been caught. And while this may make him seem like a crafty robber, he really isn't. This guy walked into a Walgreens at about 9 o'clock at night on September 24th. He carried with him a tote bag, empty when he passed through the doors. After a few minutes of walking around, his tote bag was full. He then ran as fast as he could out the front doors and disappeared into the night. So what makes this guy such a dumb criminal? After all, he did technically get away with a crime. Well, it's because he really didn't get away with much. According to one of the employees who witnessed the man roaming through the store, he walked straight to the personal hygiene section and filled his bag full of body wash. He stole bottles of body wash and other related cleaning products. Apparently, he just needed to get clean. Who knows why he couldn't afford to pay for the body wash, but he obviously smelled so bad that he had no choice but to rob a Walgreens. 3. Getting away on the bus. Giovanni Baltodano is one of the stupidest criminals in the world. You might say he's not the sharpest tool in the shed. He's currently facing 31 charges following an aggressive series of robberies that went on between January 22nd to February 22nd, all in 2021. He managed to rob at least 11 different places while miraculously making his getaway on the public bus. At this point, it makes you wonder if Giovanni was a criminal mastermind or if the police were really so incompetent that they couldn't catch a bank robber on a bus. Whatever the case, the police have referred to the series of holdups as the Note Be Stupid robberies because of the interesting way in which Giovanni asked for the cash. When he entered whichever establishment he was robbing, he would hand over a note with something like, "This is a robbery. Give me the money," written on it. And naturally, they always did. But according to the cops, he never made off with more than $950 in any single robbery. Maybe that's because he went from small business to small business, robbing sandwich shops and cell phone stores. He even robbed a dollar store, as if he was expecting to make off with more than $50. In the end, he simply got too greedy. You would think that after 11 successful robberies, you would just give up. But he kept on robbing, and the police eventually identified him, tracked him to his home, and locked him up behind bars. 2. Locked inside. In Philadelphia, a would-be robber managed to get himself stuck inside of a store as he tried to rob it. According to what a police detective told the local Philadelphia ABC news station, if all robbers were as dumb as this guy, cops' jobs would be a lot easier. The robbery attempt happened at about 5:30 at night, with only one store employee being present. The man walked into the store, pulled a gun on the employee, and then pointed it straight at his head. The robber told the employee to give him the money, and in response, the employee said that he didn't have any. But he said that if the robber would just wait a minute, he could get him some. The employee said that there was another worker outside and that he had lots of money. Amazingly, the stupid criminal agreed to wait in the store while the employee ran out to get his cash. What the robber didn't realize was that this would be the end of his criminal career. The employee ran outside, quickly locked the door using his key, and then pulled down the metal gate and ran away. The robber was trapped inside the store with no way out. The police eventually found him trapped inside, but not before he had unloaded his gun at the door lock in a futile attempt to escape. Apparently, shooting out a lock isn't quite as simple as it is in the movies. 1. A bold-faced robbery. A man has been ridiculed mercilessly for his shocking bare-faced robbery. His name is Richard Giles, and he tried to rob the Trustmark Bank in Jackson, Mississippi. He walked into the bank with his face mask, you know, the ones everyone has to wear for COVID-19, pulled down around his chin like a diaper. The one time in history when you can actually walk into a bank with a mask on, this guy had his drooped underneath his chin. He stood in line with his face clearly visible to the cameras, then handed a note to the bank teller and made off with a small sum of cash. Following the holdup, the Jackson police tweeted screenshots from the surveillance footage which clearly showed who the robber was. It took them no time at all to track Richard Giles down and arrest him.
Thanks for watching. Would you rather fake your own death and get caught, or help a loved one fake their own death and live with the secret forever? Let us know in the comments, and remember to subscribe. See you soon. Bye.